I cave. I'm not proud of it. Let's move on. When you're a kid growing up and you're reaching into that teenage years, there comes a point where you got to make a decision. And it's a decision that will shape the rest of your existence. And it's a hard decision. Do you give up your childhood? Or do you admit that some of the things within that childhood had a lot of merit and were worthwhile? For me, at the age of 15, was when the moment cemented the person I was going to be and what I loved. I was working at 15 years old in a grocery store. This grocery store had one of the old spinners, comic books. And one day I look, and there it is, a classic X-Men with Magneto on the cover, triumphant over the X-Men. And I walked by that comic book for days. I was looking at it going, did Magneto beat the X-Men? What happened? I used to read X-Men when I was a kid. I'm sitting there looking at this going, what is happening? Until finally, I break down with, I think it was 75 cents at the time. Wow, comic books are 75 cents. What? Think about that. And went home and read it. And got back into comic books. And I got back into comic books. Magneto's story arc, if you actually ever read it and understand it, a lot of people go, oh, he's the villain we understand. And I don't think people do. Because he had this fantastic story arc of understanding that his principles were correct, but his actions were not. And that he ultimately led himself to finding redemption. And then leading the X-Men for a brief time. He actually was the guy who ran the New Mutant School originally. And in that, one of the things I have always complained about when Jim Lee took over was he reverted Magneto back to evil. After all that. And it was a very complex, very well written, very well thought out story that Chris Claremont gave us about this character. And it made perfect sense for him to follow that journey. And it was like one of these things that was like about the X-Men was like, they were different. They would find the good in the bad guys and bring them over. And it wasn't like, I mean, they do that now, but it's so forced. But then it was like, poor Rogue, she's, confused because she can't touch anybody and she hurts people and she doesn't want to hurt people. But Wolverine's still pissed off that he basically wiped Carol Danvers' mind. This is the kind of things that they dealt with. And it was cool. And it was awesome. And I liked it. I really enjoyed it. And I never really got over Jim Lee turning this character into the monster he was. Again, after what he had learned. I have to say that. And I feel like that's when I lost my childhood. Because X-Men were never the same after that. To me. And I'm not saying that it should have always been, Claremont. It should have been always Claremont's vision. Claremont has his stuff. He's a great writer. He wrote some of the greatest X-Men stories ever. But, you can't have one guy running a show forever. Especially on a team running as long as the X-Men. But when you're talking about characters, Magneto to me was one of the best. One of my favorite X-Men stories of all time, God Love Man Kills, is probably the best Magneto story ever. And it is, if you want to understand old school mentality of X-Men, read that story. It is phenomenal. And I argue is one of the best comic books ever written. I know people lean on Watchmen. I know people lean on, Dark Knight Returns. I always lean on God Love Man Kills. Because that is an incredible story. And deserves your attention. So then, oops. In rebuilding my Marvel Legends collection, there was this issue. I had the Toy Biz version of Magneto, which is a great figure and still holds up. One of the things I really love about it is that the helmet is removable, but it's not. It fits so snugly on his head that it looks like it's molded on. It's actually pretty incredible, and it's made of soft material. So I always did like that, but I wanted a more modern looking figure. So I was looking around. I did find the Family Matters pack, and I was just like, oh, that's expensive. And then I saw this Mafex, and that's expensive too. But I said, it's Magneto. It's worth it. Worth it. He's well worth it. He's Magneto, for Christ's sake. So taking him out and comparing him with my other Magnetos, I've got House X Magneto here, which is a good base Magneto. I didn't like the shoulder pads holding down his arms much, and then I've been using I believe this head also comes from the House X Magneto, and I'm using that with Age of Apocalypse Magneto as kind of a stand-in for a more modern Magneto. But I really came to the determination that Hasbro's not going to give us the Magneto we want. They never will. And I just decided, of course, now that I've bought this one, they probably will. And it's like, damn you. Damn you to hell, Hasbro. Because it's just so easy. It's like, make the characters we want and the looks we want, we buy them. Nothing complicated. Somehow Hasbro makes that complicated. I mean, they still haven't given us a Dan Quiche Ghost Rider. They've given us several Johnny Blazes. Not a Dan Quiche. I mean, it's simple and knock it out of the park, man. Come on. How hard can this be? No, let's just re-release the same figures we did before. Here's Gladiator Hulk. A lot of people keep referring this to Jim Lee Magneto. And I'm like, man, he's had this same look since Jack Kirby. And, you know, at the very least, that buffed up style is John Byrne. So, you know, and man, you want to talk about tough. That issue of Classic X-Men I was just talking about. Magneto takes full force hits from Colossus and ends up winning the fight. Well, that's tough. But, yeah, I mean, I get that people think it's more Jim Lee-ish because it's what's on the cover and what's on the actual box itself. I mean, this is Magneto. He's been rocking this look for a long time. You know, Jim Lee just did an interpretation of it. This is not necessarily a Jim Lee. I'm just stating my opinion right here. It's, you know, I mean, I could say it's John Byrne and be just as justified. So in looking at how Magneto measures up with other Marvel Legend figures, here he is with Deadpool and Ultimate Captain America. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, he's too short because he's not taller than Cap. And it's like, that's a tough one because I always thought Cap was a little bit taller than Magneto. But maybe that's just me. I'm not sure. And I don't know. Some people like Magneto to be 900 feet tall. I don't know why. I always had him around 6 to 6'2". Maybe that's with the helmet. So I think it works out okay. For even more comparison, here he is with fellow Brotherhood of Mutants member Mystique and Daredevil. Again, I think he fits in quite well. Perfectly, no. Can't say perfectly, but he does work, and I think for the time being, this is the Magneto I'm going to go with, just because he fits in with my Marvel Legends as much as I think he should. The wire cape is a little intimidating because it's accordioned up under him, and you know once you get it out, you're never going to get it back. But in some ways, that works for it, because why would you want to put it back? And you can get some dynamic stuff out of the wire cape. That is a nice touch that I don't think people really appreciate till they get it in their hands and then they start using it. And of course, he has a ton of effects, and they're great effects. Really good. Now, some you got to be careful with, because I have heard that, you know, even though the fists fit into some of them, they can get lost in it too. So, you got to watch out for that. To me, though, Magneto is a character that needs a really good figure. And is this the really good figure? I'm thinking, yeah, the bright colors, the strong cape, the posability with the cape, and despite some people's contrary nature, the scale all work. Now, is he perfect and is he worth the price? Again, it's Mafex. I'm going to say this because this is my honest to goodness opinion. They're overpriced. They're just overpriced. They're good, but they're overpriced. It's that simple. I mean, if you want a really good figure and want to be pretty much guaranteed a good figure, okay, there you go. But the price tag, I feel a little gypped. Again, about half what most stores sell them for in the U.S., I say is what they're worth. Again, higher quality, obviously, but at the same time, that tag is prohibitive. And I know you can buy them on some sites and get them for, some say 60, although I never see that price. I usually see 75. But even still, if it's worth 50, that's still higher than what they're worth. What's your point? I don't understand some people sometimes with that kind of logic. Plus, the shipping usually chalks it up pretty close to American prices anyway, so you don't really end up saving money. As a figure, I'd give it probably 4.5 out of 5. With the price tag, I'll drop it down to 2.5 reluctantly. That price tag is just too prohibitive. It doesn't. Again, I gave him 2 shots, and I was very careful about which ones I picked because I wanted to make sure it was figures I thought would really enhance my collection, and also figures that I don't think Hasbro will ever nail properly. Psylocke and now Magneto, and I may stop there. I may not. I may give it one more shot. I'm thinking about it, but at the same time, that price is so prohibitive. It'll be a while. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It'll be a while if I get another Mafex. Okay. If you've got the money, great. If not, don't. It's sort of like, it's almost a status. I feel like there's a status symbol involved with that. I collect Mafex. Rather than it being, okay, well, how is this? What is it? Is this really enhancing my collection? Is this really helping me get my Marvel characters that I want? That's probably a debate for another time, but anyway, that's my rough review of Magneto. Don't forget to like and subscribe.